So the next topic in the lecture is factors affecting drug absorption. In last video we discussed about the mechanism of drug absorption. Now the next topic is factors affecting drug absorption. So most of the drugs will be given through oral route as it is the most convenient route and the patient compliant route. So what are the factors which are going to affect the drug absorption when the drug is administered through oral route? So when the drug is given through oral route, either through a tablet or a capsule or any other oral route, liquid dosage forms, any dosage forms, there are three factors which mainly affect the drug absorption. One is biological factor, that is how the body is going to affect the drug absorption, and second is the physicochemical properties of the drug, how the drug's property is going to affect the drug absorption, and the last property is based on the role of dosage form, the dosage form in which the drug is administered. Dosage form in the sense whether it is solid dosage form, liquid dosage form, or in any other dosage forms in which the drug is administered. So there are three factors by which this oral drug absorption will be affected. First one is biological factor, second one is physicochemical properties of the drug, and the third one is the role of dosage form. So first, initially, the biological factors. So what all the biological factors or the factors related to our systemical is going to affect the drug absorption. So the different biological factors which are going to affect the oral drug absorption are, first is membrane physiology. How the membrane physiology is going to affect the drug absorption. Then it is GI physiology, and third is gastric emptying, and then effect of food. Food presence also can affect the drug absorption. Then presence of any disease or malabsorption. How the malabsorption is going to affect the drug absorption. So the biological factors which are going to affect the oral drug absorption are membrane physiology, GI physiology, gastric emptying, presence of food, and the role of disease. In that, the first factor is membrane physiology. We already discussed in mechanism of drug absorption about the membrane. The biological membrane is made of lipids, proteins, and lipoproteins. It has numerous pores and some carriers. So generally, highly lipophilic and small hydrophilic molecules can pass by passive diffusion. That is highly lipophilic and small hydrophilic. Whereas large polar molecules or hydrophilic molecules uses carrier mediated transport for their transfer. This, as the membrane is lipophilic in nature, lipid and small hydrophilic molecules can passively diffuse, whereas large polar molecules and some nutrient or the dietary products, mainly the end products like monosaccharides, amino acids, and fatty acids, some of minerals and vitamins can absorb by carrier mediated transport. So depending upon the physiology of the membrane, the drug absorption varies. Depending upon the property of the drug, like whether it is lipophilic or hydrophilic, small or large, the diffusion pattern or the absorption pattern varies in case of drug. So we have the next factor, that is GI physiology. What is GI? GI is gastrointestinal tract. How the gastrointestinal tract affects the physiology of the gastrointestine affects the drug absorption. So GIT has mainly three components. So we have stomach, and then small intestine and large intestine are also known as colon. In small intestine we have initially the proximal part is known as duodenum, then the central part is jejunum, and then ileum region is there. So these three parts comprises of small intestine. So we have three segments in GIT: stomach, small intestine and large intestine. So the physiology of the GIT is completely varied anatomically, morphologically, as well as their secretions, pH and the presence of enzymes varies in different part of GIT. As you see, initially in stomach morphologically it is pouch-like structure and is made of smooth epithelial cell. Now what is the importance of stomach in drug absorption? Mainly weakly acidic drugs and the neutral compounds absorb from stomach. So weakly acidic drugs and neutral drugs absorb from stomach. Now when you see the small intestine, this is having larger surface area available for absorption because of its surface area, as it is having a numerous tube-like structure and it is very lengthy in nature. So it has larger surface area available for absorption. Also the presence of villi and microvilli increases the surface area. The epithelial here is of rough in nature because of this presence of villi and microvilli. Now what is the importance of small intestine in drug absorption? Weakly basic drugs absorb from small intestine as well as the dietary components absorb from small intestine. And one more significance of the small intestine in drug absorption is the carrier mediated transport takes place from small intestine. So weakly basic drugs absorb from small intestine. Dietary components like you have the end products, monosaccharides, amino acids, proteins and product, amino acids, fatty acids, minerals, vitamins, all the dietary compounds and products absorbs from small intestine, as well as carrier mediated transport takes place from small intestine, as there are so many carriers present in the small intestine. Now the large intestine, again it is a tube-like structure, but compared to small intestine, this has less surface area and there is no presence of villi or microvilli. But the importance of colon region, that is large intestinal region, is in drug absorption. The drug which has been left from stomach and intestine for absorption will reach the colon, and that is the importance of the drug will be very much less when it reaches the large intestine. The drug will be either absorbed from stomach or in small intestine. The drug available for absorption in colon region will be negligible, whereas when the drug is given in sustained release formulation or delayed release. Sustained release means at least the drug will be given for 8-hour release. So the drug resides in the stomach for minimum of 2 hours. So when it crosses the small intestine, maybe up to 4 to 6 hours in small intestine, then the leftover will reach the colon. So in case of sustained release, the absorption of drug is important in colon region. And delayed release means enterally coated formulation, which doesn't release the drug in stomach, it releases the drug in small intestine. So the leftover drug will be absorbed from the large intestine or colon region. And another importance of colon region is presence of microflora. Some drugs like sulfasalazine needs bioactivation. This drug will be bioactivated in colon. That is, sulfasalazine is a drug, mainly a prodrug, which is inactive form of drug. This gets activated in the colon region for its anti-inflammatory activity and is used in ulcerative colitis. That is, colitis means inflammation in colon. So for such drugs which needs bioactivation in colon region, the absorption of drug is important in colon. So three regions are there in GIT. They are morphologically different. You can see morphologically they are different. Anatomically, the cells they are made of or the tissues they are made of, they are also different, and the secretions and the pH is also different. So importance of stomach is that absorption of weakly acidic or neutral drugs takes place from stomach, and small intestine, weakly basic drugs and the dietary compounds absorbed from stomach and carrier mediated absorption takes place in small intestine, whereas colon is responsible mainly in case of drugs administered through either sustained release or delayed release formulation, and the drugs which needs bioactivation in colon region, because colon is the region of microflora which has so many enzymes for bioactivation. So such drugs also absorb from colon region. So there are other physiological parameter in GIT that also differs in all the regions, that is GI blood flow and GI pH. So the blood flow to the GIT is also different and the GI pH is also different. So what is the role of blood flow? So blood flow is not going to affect the drugs which are polar in nature, because the absorption of polar drugs is independent of concentration gradient. Blood flow is necessary for maintaining concentration gradient. So blood flow will affect the passive diffusion and the polar drug absorption will be independent of blood flow. So passive diffusion means lipophilic drugs will be, the absorption of lipophilic drugs will be affected by blood flow, but the absorption of polar drugs are independent of blood flow. And another role of blood flow is first pass metabolism. First pass metabolism. What does it mean? The blood which are flowing through the GIT empties into the liver. So the blood carries drug, also enters the liver, and the liver is the major organ responsible for metabolism. So the most of the drugs which enters the liver may undergo metabolism and may convert into inactive form of drug, and there will be reduction in bioavailability of the drug, which are known as first pass metabolism. So this is also being affected by GI blood flow. So the drug's bioavailability will also be affected by GI blood flow through first pass metabolism. So first pass metabolism will affect the absorption of drugs from lipophilic drug, and also it affects the bioavailability of drug through first pass metabolism. So blood flow has 2 points to remember. So the GI pH. So GI pH, it also differs from stomach, small intestine and large intestine. So generally the pH of stomach is about 1 to 3 and the pH of small intestine will be of around 6 to 7 and it will be greater than 7 up to 8 it will be in colon region. So mainly the weakly acidic drugs like NSAIDs absorbs from stomach. Why weakly acidic drugs absorb from stomach? Because acidic drugs will be unionized in acidic pH. As acidic drugs like NSAIDs, sulfonamides, These are all acidic drugs. Weakly acidic drugs like NSAID sulfonamides will be ionized in stomach pH and may absorb in stomach. Whereas weakly basic drugs like antidepressants and antihistaminics may get absorbed from small intestine. Again, the drugs sustained release form and the delayed release form gets absorbed from large intestine. So the pH also plays an important role, as the drug pKa will make the drug ionized or unionized in different pH. So acidic drugs will be unionized in stomach and acidic drugs absorption will be more in stomach, whereas basic drugs will be unionized in small intestine. So basic drug gets absorbed from small intestine. So there are some factors which may affect the GI pH. So what are the factors which may affect the GI pH? Fasting. Fasting may affect the GI pH. Fasting may decrease the GI pH. It may make the pH acidic in nature. Presence of food will increase the pH. And presence of fats and fatty acids will increase the pH. And some of the drugs also, like acidic drugs, may increase the pH, whereas some drugs like antispasmodics, antacids neutralizes acid. So the acidic pH of the GIT, that is stomach, mainly gastric region, will be increased. The pH will be increased in stomach by antacids or proton pump inhibitors. Protons are responsible for acidity, that is decrease in pH, but this proton pump inhibitors will reduce the H plus ions and will increase the pH. So pH also will be influenced by presence of food, fasting, as well as some drugs and some diseases also changes the pH of the GIT. Once there will be changes in the GI pH, there will be changes in the oral drug absorption. So this is the second factor, that is biological factor, which is GI physiology. So under membrane physiology, we have studied about the different drugs. Lipophilic drugs absorbed by passive diffusion, hydrophilic drugs absorbed by carrier mediated transport. And under GI physiology, we have discussed 2 points, that is GI pH and GI blood flow. Now the third point is gastric emptying. What does it mean? Gastric emptying, it is emptying of content from stomach to small intestine. When the content is empty, and the time taken for emptying of contents from stomach to small intestine is known as gastric emptying time or gastric emptying rate. On an average, the gastric emptying rate will be of 2 hours. If it will be of liquid diet or liquid component which has been consumed through oral route, then they may have about 30 minutes to 1 hour for gastric emptying. Whereas for solid content and fat and fatty acids will require more than 4 hours for its gastric emptying. We know already, if you just drink juice and we will feel hungry early, that is within half an hour, because gastric emptying will be faster. Within half an hour, the stomach will be emptied. But when we eat some oily foods or the very rich foods, like we eat parathas or we eat biryanis, then that will cause the gastric emptying to be delayed up to 4 hours. We won't feel hungry after eating such rich foods, because gastric emptying will be delayed because of this fats and fatty acids. So on an average, the optimum gastric emptying or the average gastric emptying time is of 2 hours. So the gastric emptying also has the effect in drug absorption. what is the effect of gastric emptying in oral drug absorption? That is, if the drug has to be absorbed from the stomach, then the gastric emptying, if it is very fast, then it will empty the content into the intestine, and the drug residence in the stomach will be, the time for residing in the stomach will be very less. So there will not be any time left for absorption. So the less amount of drug will be absorbed from the stomach. Opposite in case of the drug which has absorption in intestine and it is delayed in gastric emptying. If gastric emptying will not take place for a longer period of time and the gastric absorption, like delayed release or enterocoated release drugs, will have drug absorption in small intestine. It won't release the drug in stomach, but the gastric emptying time is delayed. It takes about 4 to 6 hours. So after 4 to 6 hours that will reach the small intestine, and then the drug will be released, and the further onset of action also will be delayed in case of the drugs absorbed from intestine. This is the effect of gastric emptying on the drug absorption. So there are some factors which will affect this gastric emptying. There are some factors which will promote the gastric emptying, and there are some factors which will inhibit the gastric emptying. So hydrogen ion concentration will inhibit the gastric emptying, whereas OH or the alkaline medium will promote the gastric emptying. Here, stress or anxiety will promote the gastric emptying, whereas depression will inhibit the gastric emptying. Similarly, disease like hypothyroidism will inhibit the gastric emptying. Hyperthyroidism will promote the gastric emptying. Like lying on the right side may promote the gastric emptying. Lying on left side will inhibit the gastric emptying. See, when we are in anger, we feel more hungry. Maybe because of anxiety promotes the gastric emptying and we feel hunger. And when we are depressed, we are in bad mood, so we won't feel hungry because gastric emptying will be inhibited because of depression. Maybe that reason. And lying on right side or left side, this also affects the gastric emptying, thus it affects the drug absorption. In families, elders used to say, don't lie on the left side, take your side on the right, because your food absorption will be more. When the food gets absorbed from right side because of gastric emptying, drug also will get faster absorption. So that may be the reason for the lying on the different sides. So this is all about gastric emptying. Now the fourth factor, biological factor mainly, which affects the drug absorption is presence or effect of food. The food presence may affect the drug absorption in different means. That is, food presence affects the, just now we discussed the point, gastric emptying. Gastric emptying will be delayed. Gastric emptying time will be increased. It will be about 4 to 6 hours in the presence of food. So what happens? The drug's dissolution will be affected, either increased or decreased, and hence the bioavailability. Then what happens in the presence of food? Gastric emptying time will be increased and dissolution may be affected, and also the onset of action will be affected. There will be increase in gastric juices. Again, this will affect the dissolution of drug and hence the absorption. There will be increase in pH. pH also will be affected, and there are possibilities that food may interact with the drug and hence it may either affect the absorption. Like in case of drug tetracycline, when it is given along with milk, which will be absorbed poorly because of presence of milk. And hepatic blood flow will be increased, that is blood flow to the liver from GIT will be increased, which may result in first pass metabolism and the bioavailability of the drug will be reduced. So these are the effects of food on drug absorption. How? Either by varying the gastric emptying rate or time, or it may increase the gastric secretions for the food to digest. That may also affect the dissolution of drug. Then that will increase the pH. In case of acidic drug, if the pH will be increased, it will be dissolved, whereas in the basic drug, anionization may take place because of increase in pH. Sometimes the components that is present in food may interact with the drug and it will lead to poor absorption. And also hepatic blood flow will be increased, which will lead to first pass metabolism and reduction in bioavailability. So there are some positive effects of food presence as well as the negative effect. Just now we talked about milk with tetracycline will lead to poor absorption. Why? Tetracycline has tetracyclic structure, that is 4 cyclic structure. In milk we have magnesium, calcium and so many metals which may have the possibility to complex with this tetracycline, leads to its poor absorption. There are some food which will increase the absorption. There may be higher absorption in case of drugs which can be given along with food, like the drug griseofulvin given along with high fatty meal will increase the drug absorption. How? Griseofulvin is a lipophilic drug. This lipophilic drug has increased dose to be given about 1 gram. Still its bioavailability is less because of its high lipophilicity. So how to give this drug? How to improve the bioavailability of this drug? This can be given along with high fatty meals. High fatty meals dissolves this lipophilic drug and it enhances the absorption of this drug and increases the bioavailability to some extent. Similarly, propranolol with high protein diet has pronounced increase in absorption. So the positive effect of food is also there and some negative effect on drug absorption. Somewhere some drugs will have poor absorption because of interaction with food and some drugs will have better absorption and better bioavailability in presence of food. So the last biological factor affecting drug absorption is the role of disease or malabsorption. Malabsorption means it is disorder in absorption of nutrients, water, electrolytes or any other like nutrients like electrolytes like calcium, sodium, even water, minerals, any other absorption disorder is known as malabsorption. And some disease conditions also affects the drug absorption. Malabsorption means the nutrient itself has disorder in absorption. There may be impairment in nutrient absorption. When the nutrient is not getting absorbed, how the drug will get absorbed? So the case of malabsorption cases, drug absorption also will be impaired. And in some cases like chronic alcoholism. So if the person is taking alcohol for a longer period of time, he may be facing with the problem of leaky gut. That is, the permeability of this biological membrane will be completely opened. There will be larger hole in the membrane permeation. So all the toxins also can pass through this membrane. Even any drugs which have been restricted in passage also can pass through this biological membrane, which may lead to toxicity of the drug. So it affects the drug absorption because of chronic alcoholism. And some drugs because of some disease like anti-cancerous drugs, like anti-metabolites like 5-fluorouracil. This also affects decreases the drug absorption or increases the drug absorption by changing the membrane permeability. Membrane permeability will be changed because of the administration of 5-fluorouracil. So this is all about the biological factors of drug that affects the oral drug absorption. So we have 5 biological factors like membrane physiology, GA physiology, gastric emptying, presence of food, and the presence of some disease or malabsorption. So today we discussed about the biological factors. In my next class, we will discuss about the physicochemical properties of the drug, how it is going to affect the oral drug absorption. Thank you.